Welcome to Kempton Math. This is Algebra 2, Unit 1, Lesson 3. Factoring, Day 1. So there's three types of factoring. The first type of factoring is called GCF. GCF is what's known as the greatest common factor. The way that I like to think of it is what's in common. So anything that's in common between the terms, we're going to pull it out on the outside of the parentheses. So what you'll notice here is for question 1, we have a 2x and a 6 that are connected by a plus sign. So is there anything in common between a 2x and a 6? Yeah, they're both divisible by 2. So we're going to pull it out, and then this is just the opposite of multiplication, the opposite of distributing. 2 times x gives you 2x, plus 2 times 3 gives you 6. All right, question 2. What's in common between a 7x and a 14y? Both are divisible by a 7. So you're going to pull it out. 7 times x, and then a 7 times 2 gives you 14, but you also need that y. Question 3. What's in common between a 5x to the third and a 15x squared? Well, for starters, they're both divisible by 5, so we're going to pull out a 5. Now, if you look carefully, x to the third has 3 x's, and x squared has 2 x's. So if I asked you how many do they both have? Both of them have at least 2 x's. So therefore, we're going to pull out an x squared on the outside. So now when I figure out what's missing, I already have my 5, so I don't need it. But what you'll notice is that I do need one more x to make that x to the third. Plus, I need my 3 because 5 times 3, but I don't need any more x's because all I needed was that x squared. All right, and then the last GCF question. We have a lot going on here, so let's do one step at a time. Between a 6 and a 15, what's in common? Well, both of these are divisible by 3. Okay, so I'm going to pull out a 3. Now let's see how many x and y's I have. I have 3 x's on the left side, I have 2 x's on the right side. So how many do they both have? At least 2 of them. Okay, and now let's check out the y's. I have 2 y's on the left, I have 5 on the right. So how many do they both have? At least 2. So I'll make this a y squared. So this is everything that's in common. So everything gets pulled out on the left outside the parentheses. So now let's figure out what's missing. 3 times 2 gives me 6. I'm going to need one more x to make that x to the third, and I don't need any more y's. Minus 3 times 5 will make 15. I don't need any more x's, but I do need y to the third. All right, there is your GCF. The next type of factoring that we have is dots. This stands for difference of 2 perfect squares. So the difference really just stands for subtraction. 2 always means that we're going to have 2 terms. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So all of them have 2 terms. All of them have minus signs. And all of them are perfect squares. So what makes perfect squares? 2 numbers that are the same that will multiply. So 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, x times x is x squared, x squared times x squared is x to the 4th, anything like that. All right, so whenever you have dots, you're going to split it up into 2 sets of parentheses. Sometimes we call this a double bubble. And you're literally just splitting everything that you see. So x squared gets split up into x and x. The only signs that will ever make a minus, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. And then you're going to split that 4 into its perfect square of 2 and 2. always go in the order that you see it. All right, question 6. I have y squared minus 100. So I'm going to do my double bubble, and I'm going to split everything up in the order that I see it. So first comes my y's, then comes my signs, and then comes my 100, which is 10 and 10. And it's okay if you reverse the signs. That can be y minus 10 and y plus 10. All right, question 7. I have a number in front of a squared, so I'm going to go in the order that I see it. So first comes a 4, so I'm going to split it up into 2 and 2. Then comes my a squared, so I'm going to split that up into a and a. Then comes my sign, and then comes my b's. All right, and the last question, again, it looks a little bit different, but it's still dots because I still see two terms, perfect squares with a minus sign. But 81 comes first, so just make sure that you have 9 and 9. Signs are opposite, and x squared is x and x. All right, and then the last type of factoring that we have, this is what's known as a trinomial. Tri means 3. So we're just always going to have 3 terms connected by plus or minus signs, and the first one typically has a squared. So we have our first trinomial, question 9. Whenever you have that, you're going to split it up into 2 sets of parentheses, and the first thing you're going to do is split up your x squared into x and x. Now, this next step, I typically like to just do my signs next. So I always say drop it like it's hot. This first sign is always going to drop. Okay, now to get the second sign, you're going to figure out what multiplies. So when you have a positive times a positive, you're always going to have a positive. And then the last thing we have is you're looking for what numbers multiply to the last number. So I have 7 times 1, and always put the bigger one first. And what you'll notice is that these then should add to my middle number. All right, so there was a lot of steps there. So let's now work out question 10. I have a trinomial. It starts with an x squared. So I'm going to do my double bubble. I'm going to split up my x and x. Now we're going to drop it like it's hot. So that first sign is going to drop down. And to find the second sign, you're always looking to see what these two signs multiply to. So a negative times a negative is a positive. All right, now it's time to figure out what multiplies to 27. So you're always going to have itself times 1, but we also have 9 times 3. So how do you know which one to choose? Well, remember, whatever ones you choose should add to that middle number. So we're going to choose 9 and 3 because when we put the bigger one first, I have a negative 9 plus 3, which adds to negative 6. All right, number 11. I have a trinomial, so we break that. We have an x and an x. It's time to drop it like it's hot. Okay, look at our two signs. I have a positive and a negative. So when you multiply that, you're going to get a negative. Now you're looking for two numbers that multiply to 18. So you're always going to have 18 and 1. I also have 9 times 2, and I also have 6 times 3. But I need that to add to a 7. So which two should I choose? 9 and 2, because when you put the bigger one first, 9 minus 2 is 7. And lastly, I have number 12. I'm going to do my double bubble. I'm going to break up my x's. I'm going to drop it like it's hot. My two signs are a negative and a positive, so when multiplied, that becomes a negative. I'm going to look for numbers that multiply to 24, so always itself in 1. I'll have 2 times 12. I'll have 8 times 3. And I'll have 6 times 4. So there's a lot going on here. And I want these to add to a negative 11. So I will choose 8 and 3. Because when I pick the bigger one first, negative 8 and negative 3 add to negative 11. A little trick here also is if you ever need to figure out what multiplies to 24 or any other number, there's a little trick here that you can do with your calculator. If you go to your calculator and you put in for the y equals the number that you're looking for divided by x. When you look at the table, you'll notice that it will list all of the numbers that multiply to that number. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, you'll see 3 times 8, and you'll see 6 times 4. It's a little hint, especially when you get to larger numbers that you're looking for. I hope that helps. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the flip side.